Have you ever looked at a perfectly healthy, giant, dark green pepper plant in your garden only to realize there is not a single actual pepper growing on it? You water it, you feed it, you give it sunshine, but all you get are leaves and dropped flowers. What if I told you that you are actually treating your peppers too well? Today, we are diving deep into the ultimate gardening secret. I'm going to show you a wildly simple trick that will leave your pepper plants absolutely covered in blossoms and heavy fruits. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will look at your vegetable garden in a completely different way. But here is the hook. To get the biggest harvest of your life, you actually have to hurt your plant first. Yes, you heard me right. Sometimes, doing what feels completely wrong is the only way to trigger an explosion of growth. Are you brave enough to try it? Let me know in the comments right now if you are Team Coddle Your Plants or Team Tough Love. To truly understand why this bizarre trick works so incredibly well, we need to quickly look at where peppers actually come from. Peppers are native to Central and South America, where they evolved in environments that were warm but often quite harsh and competitive. In the wild, a pepper plant has only one single goal in its entire life. It wants to reproduce. It wants to create seeds to ensure the survival of its species. When we plant peppers in our luxurious backyard gardens with perfect potting soil and endless water, the plant gets lazy. It thinks it has all the time in the world, so it focuses on growing big, pretty leaves instead of producing fruit. For decades, gardeners have struggled with this, throwing expensive chemical fertilizers at the problem, hoping for a miracle. But the true secret lies in understanding the psychology of the plant. We have to simulate a specific type of natural stress to trigger its survival instinct. When the plant feels the right kind of pressure, it panics in the best way possible. It immediately stops focusing on leaves and starts pumping out flowers and fruits as fast as it can. And that is exactly what our simple trick is designed to do. Let us start with the core trick, the absolute foundation of this entire method. It is called pinching the king bloom. Picture this exact moment in your mind. Your little pepper plant has just been transplanted, and it has finally formed its very first tiny flower bud, right in the center fork of the main stem. Your immediate instinct as a gardener is to celebrate. You want to leave it alone and watch it grow into your very first beautiful pepper. But here is the massive secret. You must pinch it off. Yes, you need to take your fingers and snap that little flower bud right off the plant. It feels incredibly wrong, almost like a crime against gardening. But this single, simple action changes the entire future of your plant. By removing that first flower, you are sending a loud and clear message to the pepper plant. You are telling it that it is not time to reproduce just yet. Instead, you are forcing the plant to redirect all of that precious energy back into growing deeper roots and thicker, stronger stems. Think of it as a long-term investment for your garden. If you leave that first flower, the plant stops growing larger and puts all its effort into that one single fruit. You will end up with a tiny, weak plant and one small pepper for the whole season. But if you pinch it, the plant responds by exploding in size over the next few weeks. Imagine a time-lapse video where a small seedling suddenly bursts into a massive, sturdy bush. That is exactly what happens here. This trick sets the stage for dozens of future peppers. Now, let us address a huge myth that stops people from using this trick. Many old-school gardeners believe that bigger is always better early in the season. They think that letting that first pepper grow proves the plant is healthy. This is completely false. It is what we call the sunk cost fallacy of gardening. When you leave that king bloom, the plant releases a hormone that actually suppresses further branching. It literally tells the rest of the plant to stop growing. So, The myth that early fruit means a good harvest is completely busted. In reality, early fruit means a stunted plant. To illustrate this perfectly, imagine looking at two pepper plants side by side in the middle of summer. The plant on the left was not pinched. It is about 120 feet tall, looking completely exhausted, and it is holding on to one single medium-sized green pepper. It has no new flowers. Now, look at the plant on the right. This is the plant where we used our trick and pinched the first bloom. It is almost 3 ft tall, incredibly bushy, and it is currently covered in 30 bright white blossoms and 10 baby peppers forming all at once. The visual difference is absolutely shocking. By sacrificing that first tiny bit of success, you unlock the genetic potential of the plant. You have to be cruel to be kind. The temporary loss of one flower is paid back 50 times over when the plant reaches its full mature size and begins to produce aggressively. But pinching the flower is only the first step of this simple trick. The second part of the equation is creating the perfect root environment. And this is where almost everyone makes a fatal mistake. You see, when you pinch that top flower, the energy shoots straight down into the soil. But if your soil is constantly soaking wet, the roots have no reason to search for water. They stay shallow, weak, and lazy. Here is the trick to fix this. You need to practice deep, infrequent watering. Imagine a sponge. If you constantly drip water on top of a sponge, only the very top stays wet. But if you soak it completely and then let it almost dry out, the water penetrates deeply. That is what you must do with your peppers. Water them deeply, soaking the soil completely, and then completely ignore them for several days. Let the top 2 ingredients of the soil become bone dry. When the soil dries out on top, it forces the newly energized roots to dive deep into the earth, searching for moisture. This creates an incredibly strong, drought-resistant root system. A great visual illustration for this is imagining an iceberg. What you see above the soil should only be a fraction of what is hiding beneath. A massive, deep root system is the only way a pepper plant can physically support the massive amount of fruit our pinching trick will eventually create. If you water every single day, you are actively destroying the magic of the King Bloom pinch. Let us move on to the next critical phase of our simple trick, which involves understanding the unique anatomy of the pepper plant. Have you ever noticed how a healthy pepper plant naturally grows? It grows straight up for a bit, and then it splits into a shape that looks exactly like the letter Y. This is called the first bifurcation. This Y shape is exactly where that king bloom we talked about usually tries to grow. But once you pinch it off, an amazing biological process begins. The plant will push incredible energy into the 2 new branches, forming the Y. From this point on, every time a branch grows, it will split into another Y shape. And at every single split, it will try to produce a cluster of flowers. This exponential branching is the real secret to endless fruit. To maximize this, we have to make sure nothing is stealing energy from the top canopy. This brings us to a technique called bottom pruning. Imagine looking at the bottom 6 in of your pepper plant. It is probably crowded with old dusty leaves touching the dirt, right? Those leaves are energy vampires. They are no longer catching good sunlight, and they are highly susceptible to soil-borne diseases splashing up when it rains. You need to take sharp scissors and snip off every single leaf and tiny sucker branch below that first main Y split. It looks drastic, leaving a bare stem at the bottom, but it is pure magic for fruit production. I really want you to visualize why this bottom pruning is such a vital part of our trick. Imagine your garden on a hot, humid afternoon in late July. The air is thick and heavy. If your pepper plant has leaves dragging on the ground, that thick air gets trapped around the base of the plant. It creates a dark, damp sauna that is the absolute perfect breeding ground for fungal infections and bacterial spot. It is a nightmare waiting to happen. But now, picture the plant that we pruned correctly. Because the bottom 6 to 8 in of the stem are completely bare, a gentle breeze can sweep right through the garden bed, constantly circulating fresh air under the canopy. This airflow acts like a natural air conditioner and a blow dryer, keeping the base of the plant dry and disease-free. Furthermore, by removing those lower leaves, the plant stops wasting nutrients trying to keep them alive. All of the nitrogen, potassium, and calcium you feed the plant are now forced to travel straight up the bare stem and directly into the upper canopy, where all the new flowers and ovaries are forming. It is like closing the lower off-ramps on a highway, so that all the traffic has to go straight to your destination. This combination of the king bloom pinch and bottom pruning is the absolute ultimate combination for forcing rapid, healthy fruit development. Now, we have to talk about the #1 reason why people try these tricks and still fail to get a massive harvest. It all comes down to a tragic event called blossom drop. There is nothing more heartbreaking than seeing your plant covered in bright white flowers, only to walk out the next morning and find them all laying dead on the soil. It is devastating. The myth is that blossom drop happens because the plant needs more fertilizer. People rush out and dump heavy nitrogen chemicals on their plants, which actually makes the problem 10 times worse. The real truth, and the next part of our simple trick, is managing stress. While we want early stress from pinching, we absolutely do not want temperature stress when the flowers open. Peppers are divas when it comes to temperature. If the daytime temperature goes above 90 degrees, or the nighttime temperature drops below 60 degrees, the pollen inside the flower actually becomes sterile. The flower realizes it cannot create a seed, so it simply aborts the mission and drops off the plant. To beat this, you need to use the trick of strategic shading. Imagine hanging a light white semi-transparent cloth over your plants during the hottest 4 hours of the afternoon sun. This simple shade cloth drops the temperature around the leaves by 10 degrees. It is just enough to keep the pollen viable, turning those delicate flowers into solid, swelling peppers instead of dead petals on the dirt. Let us talk about the specific food your plant desperately craves right when it is covered in blossoms. This is a crucial element of our simple trick. Most beginner gardeners go to the store and buy a general, all-purpose fertilizer. These are usually packed with a massive amount of nitrogen. Nitrogen is the chemical that makes leaves grow green and big. But remember, we do not want more leaves right now, we want fruit. If you give a blossoming pepper plant too much nitrogen, it will actually drop its flowers and go back to growing leaves. It is a disaster. To get the plant heavily loaded with fruit, you must switch its diet. You need to perform the trick of feeding heavy phosphorus and potassium. Think of phosphorus as the fuel for building strong roots and vibrant flowers, and think of potassium as the energy drink that helps the plant transport water and build the actual heavy flesh of the pepper. A fantastic visual for this is to imagine a bodybuilder. Nitrogen is like eating a giant bowl of pasta for energy, but potassium and phosphorus are the actual proteins that build the heavy muscle. You want to look for an organic fertilizer where the middle and last numbers on the bag are much higher than the first number. Look for things like bone meal or specialized tomato and pepper organic feeds. Applying this specific nutrient profile right when the first true flowers open will lock those blossoms onto the stem like super glue. There is another hidden nutrient secret that is absolutely vital to our simple trick, and ignoring it will lead to the most disgusting problem in the garden. I am talking about blossom end rot. You have probably seen this before. You grow what looks like a beautiful, perfect green pepper. You get so excited to pick it. But when you turn it around, the entire bottom of the pepper is a black, mushy, rotting mess. It is absolutely sickening. The massive myth in the gardening community is that this is caused by a disease or a fungus in the soil. That is completely false. Blossom end rot is a physical defect caused by a severe lack of calcium reaching the fruit while it is developing. When the plant is rapidly growing those massive fruits we triggered earlier, it needs calcium to build the cell walls of the pepper. If it runs out of calcium, the cells at the very tip of the fruit literally collapse and die, turning black and mushy. The trick to stopping this dead in its tracks is twofold. First, you must ensure consistent watering, as we discussed earlier, because calcium is only transported through the plant via water. If the soil goes completely bone dry during fruiting, the calcium stops moving. Second, you can use a rapid rescue trick. Imagine dissolving a handful of finely crushed eggshells or a specialized liquid calcium spray in a watering can. Applying this directly to the root zone at the first sign of flowering provides an immediate calcium boost, ensuring every single pepper grows thick, crunchy walls without a single black spot. While we are talking about secret ingredients to boost our harvest trick, we have to address the most famous internet gardening hack of all time. I am sure you have seen videos claiming that dumping Epsom salts on your peppers will create a miracle harvest overnight. Let us separate the myth from the reality right now. Epsom salt is simply magnesium sulfate. It is not a complete fertilizer. The myth is that it cures everything. The reality is that magnesium is essential, but only in tiny amounts. Magnesium is the central atom in the chlorophyll molecule. Without it, the plant cannot absorb sunlight properly. If your plant is lacking magnesium, you will see a very specific visual sign. Imagine looking at a pepper leaf, where the veins are dark green, but all the space between the veins has turned a pale, sickly yellow. That is magnesium deficiency. If you see that, our trick is to mix exactly 1 TBSP of Epsom salts into 1 gallon of water and spray it directly onto the leaves early in the morning. The leaves will absorb the magnesium almost instantly, turning deep, vibrant green within a matter of days. However, if your leaves are already perfectly green, dumping Epsom salts into the soil will actually ruin your harvest. Too much magnesium locks up the calcium in the soil, completely preventing the plant from absorbing it, which leads directly back to that disgusting blossom end rot we just talked about. Use the Epsom salt trick only when the leaves show you they need it. Now that we have the plant perfectly pruned, fed, and watered, we need to talk about a simple trick that acts as a magical shield for your newly forming peppers. This is all about the power of mulching. Most people think mulch is just for making landscaping look pretty around trees. But in the vegetable garden, a thick layer of organic mulch is the ultimate secret weapon for massive yields. Think of the soil surface in your garden like the skin on your hands in the middle of winter. Without lotion, it cracks, it dries out, and it gets damaged. When the harsh summer sun beats down on bare dirt, the soil bakes. The microscopic life in the soil dies, and the shallow roots of the pepper plant literally cook in the heat. The trick is to lay down a 3-in-thick layer of clean straw, dried grass clippings, or shredded leaves, completely covering the dirt around your plants. Imagine slipping a cool, damp blanket over the soil. This simple layer does 3 miraculous things for our pepper production. First, it completely stops weeds from growing and stealing the nutrients we just added. Second, it locks the moisture into the soil, maintaining that perfect, even hydration needed to prevent blossom end rot. And third, as the mulch slowly breaks down over the summer, It creates a gentle, continuous drip feed of organic compost directly to the root zone. Mulching is the silent, unglamorous trick that ensures all our other hard work actually pays off in huge, heavy peppers. Let us take our simple trick to the next level with a technique that professional greenhouse growers use, but backyard gardeners almost never do. This is the trick of manual agitation, or playing the role of the bumblebee. Pepper flowers are technically self-pollinating. This means every single flower contains both the male pollen and the female receptor needed to create a fruit. They do not strictly need a bee to carry pollen from one plant to another. However, the pollen still needs to physically drop from the anther down onto the stigma inside that tiny flower. In nature, the wind shakes the plant, or a heavy bumblebee lands on the flower and creates a vibration that shakes the pollen loose. But what if your garden is blocked from the wind by a tall fence? Or what if it has been raining for a week and the bees are hiding? The flowers will open, sit there unpollinated, and then drop off. The trick is simple, but wildly effective. Every single morning, while you are drinking your coffee, walk out to your pepper plants. Take your hand and gently flick the main stem of the plant with your finger, or softly shake the entire cage if you are using one. Imagine you are ringing a tiny bell. You want to see the whole plant vibrate for just a second. This gentle morning shaking perfectly mimics the vibration of a bumblebee, guaranteeing that the pollen drops exactly where it needs to go inside every single open flower. It is a 10-second trick that can double your fruit set overnight. As your peppers finally begin to form and swell, we run into another massive psychological hurdle that ruins potential harvests. It is the temptation to wait for the perfect, fully ripe color. We all want that glorious, sweet, bright red or yellow bell pepper, but here is a brutal truth that ties directly into our simple trick for maximizing yield. Creating color takes an unbelievable amount of energy from the plant. A green pepper is just an unripe pepper. The plant puts all its energy into growing the physical size of the green pepper, but then it hits a wall. To turn that pepper red, the plant has to spend weeks pumping sugars and complex compounds into the fruit. While it is doing this, it completely stops producing new flowers. It assumes its job is almost done. If you want a massive total yield, the trick is to employ the strategy of the early harvest. Imagine your plant has 5 beautiful, full-sized green bell peppers on it. Instead of waiting 3 more weeks for them to turn red, you need to harvest at least 3 of them while they are still green and crunchy. The moment you cut those large fruits off the plant experiences a massive energy surge. It realizes it just lost its babies, so it instantly panics and starts pushing out a whole new wave of white blossoms to try and replace them. By strategically harvesting green peppers early and often, you trick the plant into a continuous loop of aggressive flowering, dramatically increasing your total pounds of food by the end of the season. Let us dive into a specialized trick for those of you growing peppers in containers or buckets. Growing in pots is incredibly popular, but it comes with a unique set of challenges that can destroy your yield if you are not careful. The biggest myth in container gardening is that any dirt will work. If you dig up heavy clay soil from your yard and put it in a bucket, your pepper plant will suffocate and die. The trick for container peppers is creating a highly oxygenated soil mix. Pepper roots need to breathe almost as much as they need water. Imagine trying to run a marathon while breathing through a tiny straw. That is what a pepper feels like in dense, wet soil. You must use a premium potting mix, heavily amended with perlite. Perlite are those little white popcorn-looking rocks. They are actually volcanic glass puffed up with heat. You want your soil mix to be at least 25% perlite. This creates millions of microscopic air pockets throughout the container. When you water the pot, the water rushes through, pulling fresh oxygen down into the root zone immediately behind it. This highly oxygenated environment supercharges root growth, allowing a plant in a small 5-gallon bucket to produce just as much fruit as a plant growing in a giant raised bed. Never underestimate the power of letting your roots breathe. It is a fundamental pillar of our massive yield strategy. We need to talk about the company your pepper plants keep. This is an organic gardening trick called companion planting, and it is a brilliant way to naturally protect the massive amount of blossoms we have just triggered. When your plant is completely covered in new, tender growth and delicate flowers, it acts like a giant magnet for every pest in the neighborhood. Aphids will try to suck the sap out of the new leaves, and hornworms will try to devour the entire plant in one night. The myth is that you need harsh chemical pesticides to protect your harvest. The truth is much more beautiful. The trick is to plant highly aromatic herbs and specific flowers directly around the base of your pepper plants. Imagine creating a biological fortress. If you plant fragrant basil and pungent marigolds right next to your peppers, the strong oils in their leaves confuse the radar of flying pests. An aphid flying by will smell the strong basil and think, "There is nothing good to eat down there," and keep flying right past your vulnerable peppers. Furthermore, flowers like sweet alyssum act as a landing pad for microscopic parasitic wasps. These tiny friendly wasps do not sting humans, but they are ruthless hunters of aphids and caterpillars. By planting the right companions, you build a self-sustaining ecosystem that guards your precious ovaries and fruits 24 hours a day without ever spraying a single drop of poison. Let us look at a structural trick that becomes absolutely mandatory if you have followed the steps correctly so far. If you pinch the king bloom, manage the nutrients, and shook the flowers, your plant is going to be holding an unnatural amount of heavy fruit. The stems of a pepper plant are remarkably strong, but they are brittle. They do not bend gracefully. They snap. A severe summer thunderstorm with high winds can take your gorgeous, heavily loaded plant and literally split it right down the middle wide joint, ruining months of hard work in seconds. The trick is proactive extreme support. A single wooden stake tied to the main stem is completely useless for a plant loaded with 30 peppers. The myth is that pepper cages are only for tomatoes. You need to visualize building a custom scaffolding system. The best trick is to use a heavy-duty square folding cage, or to drive 3 tall wooden stakes in a triangle around the plant. As the branches grow outward, loaded with the weight of swelling fruit, you must tie the individual branches loosely to the outer supports using soft, stretchy garden twine. Do not use wire as it will cut into the stem as it thickens. By supporting the outer canopy, you take all the stress off that central Y joint. This ensures that even when the plant is top-heavy with 5 lb of giant bell peppers, it can easily survive heavy rain and strong winds without losing a single branch. Let us talk about a watering trick that sounds like science fiction, but is rooted in hardcore plant biology. We already discussed deep watering, but the temperature of the water you use can actually cause a phenomenon known as thermal shock blossom drop. Imagine you are standing outside on a blistering hot 95-degree summer afternoon. You are sweating and hot. Suddenly, someone dumps a bucket of freezing cold ice water right onto your feet. Your entire body would tense up in shock, right? That is exactly what happens to your pepper plant if you use freezing cold water straight from a deep well or a chilly garden hose during the hottest part of the day. The roots experience massive thermal shock. The plant panics, assumes a catastrophic weather event is happening, and immediately aborts its most vulnerable parts, which are the newly formed flowers and tiny ovaries. The trick to avoid this is to practice solarized watering. If you use a watering can or a rain barrel, let the water sit out in the ambient air temperature for a few hours before applying it. You want the water to feel lukewarm to the touch, matching the temperature of the soil. By providing tepid water, the roots absorb the moisture instantly and peacefully without any stress response, allowing the plant to continue pumping energy directly into fruit production without missing a single beat. As we move into the peak of summer, there's a visual trick you need to look out for regarding the sun. We always hear that peppers need full blazing sun all day long. While they love sunshine, the actual fruit of the pepper is highly susceptible to something called sun scald. Think of it as a severe sunburn for your vegetables. When a green pepper is suddenly exposed to harsh, direct afternoon sunlight for hours at a time, the skin literally cooks. A large, papery white blister will form on the side of the pepper, eventually rotting and ruining the entire fruit. The myth is that you should strip away all the leaves so the sun can ripen the peppers faster. This is terrible advice. The trick to perfect peppers is maintaining what we call the leafy umbrella. While we prune the bottom of the plant for airflow, we want the top of the plant to remain incredibly bushy. Imagine the top leaves acting like a large green parasol, casting a dappled moving shadow over the heavy fruit hanging underneath. If you notice a pepper is completely exposed to the harsh afternoon sun because a branch shifted, you need to act. You can literally drape a light piece of cloth over that specific cluster, or gently tie a leafy branch over it to cast a shadow. Protecting the developing fruit from direct ultraviolet rays ensures a flawless, thick-walled harvest without any burnt spots. There is a fascinating soil biology trick that professional organic farmers use to supercharge their pepper yields, and it involves something you can make for free in your backyard. We are talking about compost tea, the ultimate liquid gold for fruiting plants. While granular fertilizer is great, it takes weeks to break down and become available to the plant. When your pepper is pushing out dozens of blossoms, it needs energy immediately. The myth is that chemical liquids are the only fast-acting option. The truth is, compost tea provides an instant massive dose of living microbiology straight to the roots. The trick is incredibly simple to visualize. Imagine taking a large handful of rich, dark, earthy compost and putting it inside an old sock or a burlap bag. You drop that bag into a 5-gallon bucket of water and let it steep for 24 hours, just like making a giant cup of tea. The water turns dark brown and becomes teeming with billions of beneficial bacteria and soluble nutrients. When you water your pepper plants with this dark liquid, the microbiology immediately goes to work in the soil, unlocking trapped nutrients and feeding them directly to the roots. It acts like an intravenous energy boost. Applying a strong dose of compost tea right as the first major flush of flowers appears is a secret trick that practically guarantees every single flower will successfully set into a solid fruit. Let us address the timing of your harvest, because how you pick the pepper is just as important as when you pick it. There is a terrible habit that ruins countless pepper plants, and it involves impatience and pulling. Pepper stems are incredibly fibrous and tough. They do not easily detach from the main branch. The myth is that you can just grab a ripe pepper and yank it off the plant. If you do this, there is a very high chance you will tear a long strip of green bark right down the main stem, or completely snap off the branch holding the next generation of flowers. That open wound invites disease and permanently damages the plant's plumbing system. The trick to a professional harvest is the clean snip. You must use a pair of sharp, clean garden pruners or heavy scissors. Imagine looking closely at the top of the pepper where it attaches to the plant. you will see a small green stem. You want to make a sharp, clean cut right through the middle of that small stem, leaving a tiny piece of it attached to the plant and a tiny piece attached to the fruit. This clean, surgical cut heals over within hours, causing zero stress to the main plant. By harvesting gently and cleanly, the plant never goes into shock, and it immediately redirects its energy into swelling the next batch of ovaries waiting in line. We have reached the final, ultimate trick of the season, often called the late-season topping. This is the grand finale of our massive yield strategy. As summer turns to fall, your plant is likely huge and covered in peppers of all sizes. But time is running out. The first winter frost is approaching. The plant does not know this. It is still trying to push out tiny new white flowers at the very top of the branches. The brutal truth is that those tiny new flowers will never have time to grow into mature peppers before the frost kills the plant. They are a complete waste of the plant's remaining energy. The trick is to perform a hard topping. About 4 weeks before your first expected frost date, you need to take your scissors and literally chop off the top 2 in of every single growing branch on the plant, completely removing all new flowers and tiny pea-sized ovaries. Imagine giving the entire bush a flat haircut. Just like our very first king bloom pinch, this sends a massive panic signal down the plant. It realizes it can no longer grow upwards or make new babies. So, it takes 100% of its remaining energy and pumps it forcefully into the existing medium-sized green peppers. This trick forces all the lagging peppers to rapidly swell to full size and begin ripening to red or yellow much faster, guaranteeing you get to harvest every ounce of usable fruit before the freezing weather arrives. So, let us look back at the incredible journey your pepper plant has just been on. By simply having the courage to pinch off that very first king bloom, you fundamentally changed the destiny of your harvest. We turned a weak single fruit plant into a massive, heavily branching powerhouse. We protected it with deep watering, strategic bottom pruning for vital airflow, and fed it the exact heavy phosphorus and calcium diet it craved precisely when it needed it most. We debunked the myths of heavy nitrogen and daily watering, and instead, we worked with the natural biology of the plant using gentle morning shakes for pollination and thick mulch for root protection. The results are undeniable. Instead of frustration, your garden is now a dense jungle of dark green leaves absolutely loaded with a cascading waterfall of heavy, thick-walled peppers. It truly is the ultimate gardening plot twist. Who knew that a tiny bit of early destruction was the master key to overwhelming abundance? If you apply this simple system, I promise you will be giving away baskets of peppers to your neighbors by August. Thank you so much for watching and learning with me today. If these secrets have changed the way you look at the potential of your garden, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. We are uncovering the hidden laws of nature that others have forgotten. Cultivate your abundance. The next harvest of wisdom will be ready for you very soon. Now, I have to ask you a question to get the conversation going down below. What is the absolute most frustrating problem you have ever faced when trying to grow peppers? And what variety are you most excited to try this new trick on next spring? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.